Hello and welcome to Addicted to Lacrosse. This is season 5, episode 0, I suppose. For today is Sunday, October 8th, 2017. I am one of your three co-hosts, Graham Perro. With me today are Tyler Fitch and Melissa Daphne. First of all, happy Thanksgiving to all of our Canadian listeners. I hope you enjoyed your turkey and stuffing and potatoes and pumpkin pie and the whole deal, as I did yesterday. We have a whole ton to talk about, given that there's been, 3 months or so of some trades and some retirements and some free agent signings and other announcements by the league. So we'll jump right into it. So there's, should be a fun time. Let's start off with some retirements. There's 5 actually fairly big names that announced their retirement so far this off season. We won't go into great detail on all of them, but a couple we'll certainly touch on. The first one to announce was Brett Bucktooth from the Black Wolves. Shortly after that was John Grant Jr., which was kind of a big deal, but by no means a surprise. Pretty much everybody expected that to happen, mainly because he's 41 years old. He missed almost all of last season from injuries, and during last season, he announced his retirement from both MSL and Major League Lacrosse. So the fact that he was retiring from National Lacrosse League was no surprise at all. Calgary's Carson Leung was the recipient of that huge hit from Alex Bouquet a couple of years ago, and he really never recovered from it. So really too bad that his career is over that quickly, or that early, I suppose I should say. Veteran Casey Behrens from The Rock also announced his retirement. And another captain, Curtis Hodgson from the Stealth, is retired from the league, and Matt Beers was named Stealth captain. And I guess we'll start there. Tyler, your thoughts? You're a Vancouver guy. What do you think?
Sure. Really going to miss having Curtis Hodgson out of the Stealth and out of the league. He's been with the team since I started going to games in 2005. So he's been there that whole time. We knew it had to end at some point, probably sooner than later. But yeah, today I'm wearing my actual Curtis Hodgson. Let me see here. Turn around. Anyways, this is his rookie jersey from his year in San Jose there. I picked it up from a good friend at a good deal when they left town in 2009. And that was actually a great guy named Pablo Sanchez, and it's his birthday today. So happy birthday, Pablo. I know you don't listen because your team left town 7 years ago, but thanks for the jersey. I guess maybe the most surprising thing about the whole thing was how quickly they were able to name Matt Beers as captain, because usually I feel like the players vote on it and they haven't set the roster yet. But maybe the players from last year who were around made that choice. But Beers was the captain of the Coquitlam Adnax junior team when they won the Minto Cup in 2010, and he can lead, and I think he leads by example, and he's a great person to have in that role. Back to Haji. I want to give one quick story just because we love the guy in my family. His dad always says hi to me at every game because I'm wearing the jersey. But Curtis never really got into like all the like big post-game partying or anything like that. He'd go out to be with the team and be part of the team. But I remember one night in Everett, we were out, and my wife had gone over to talk to Curtis about something. And Curtis just never does anything ever. And so a bunch of guys are on the bar like, whoa, Curtis is talking to a girl. He's talking to a woman. Like, who's that? And I just go, oh, that's my wife. And they're like, what? Like, Dad, she had a question about the game and he's answering it. And that's all he wanted to talk about. He didn't really care about any of the other stuff. He just loves the game at all points. And it was I think that was my best experience of a lot of players go out to the bar just to party. A lot of players go out hey, looking for girls, whatever, because they're young and on the road and having fun. And he was pretty much the opposite of all that. He was tons of fun, but he was fun in a different way, but tons of fun. Also want to talk about John Grant Jr. retiring. He was always just amazing. The greatest stick wizard ever, as far as cradling hiding the ball behind the back, underhand, everything. I know that when he retired, I said like he wasn't the GOAT, but he'll be missed. And I think nobody ever said anything to me because nobody reads my tweets apparently. But I think I do want to qualify that by saying he wasn't the GOAT of indoor, the NLL, because that's Tavares. But I would say the GOAT being the greatest of all time. That John Grant Jr. is the greatest of all time at all lacrosse, between field and indoor. I can't think of anybody who was more dominant in both situations that I've seen. I think the Gary Gate probably was, but he didn't have pro leagues to play in for the same amount of time. He only caught a couple years in the MLL, and he was already past his prime. But in his prime, like 2007, 8, 9, he won world titles, indoor titles, MLL titles. He was incredible. So I will say that he is the greatest of all time, or he's the GOAT for all of lacrosse. But if you look at like just subsets, like just the NLL, I was still going to lean towards Tavares. But it's probably a good point of contention that people want to argue about. What are your thoughts on retirements, Melissa?
Surprised by some. I'm definitely disappointed to hear about Carson, especially as it was my team goalie that put him out of commission. We've lost a few players to concussions over the years, and so it's always been sad to hear things like that because, as we know, this is a part-time job for these guys, and to have something that's basically life-impacting happen because they're doing something they love it's hard. Sad to see that we lost another player to concussions. As for the other four, I would say, yeah, we've kind of been expecting some of those. Maybe not last year or maybe next year, but we knew they were on the horizon somewhere. As for John Grant Jr., I think everybody who's listened to us knows how I feel about him, at least with my team. I agree with what Tyler said, that he is at least was a phenomenal player and should be recognized as such. I get frustrated because he isn't quite that same player and yet was often treated as such, and so it had a negative impact on games, and so that's where a lot of my frustration came. But there's no doubt that he had an impact on the sport. He had an impact on the players that we are seeing play now, and he did help grow the sport, and so we have to thank him and appreciate those efforts too. And as Tyler said, he played in both leagues, and so both areas, and so it'll be interesting to see if he ends up stepping into another role with the Mammoth or if he goes elsewhere. But as for those, yeah, I'm gonna miss watching some of them on the field. You know, Brett Bucktooth is. I remember watching him play for the Sting. So I remember watching some of these players when I was first getting into the league, and so to watch them. Granted, there's been lots of players that I've seen come and go that were also there when I first started watching. So these guys had some pretty good careers. But yeah, it's always a sad thing, when they announce a retirement, because you don't want to watch them continue to play past their prime where they just look like they need to hang up the cleats, but you don't want to say goodbye. So yeah, it's always sad. But I hope they do some nice big things, and hopefully, like some of the other players that we've seen, they still stay in or engaged some way with the league. We've seen some move on to coaches, as we're going to talk about later. One of them is a general manager now. It could be interesting. Did you have any other thoughts, Graham?
You guys pretty much covered it. Lots of respect for Curtis Hodgson and his longevity. I mean, he was around for ages with various different stealth teams. Very well respected. I mean, you don't become captain of the team generally by not being respected by your teammates. And it looks like Matt Beers is a worthy successor, so that's good. As for John Grant, he was just crazy good at some points. There was The one issue with his an ACL in his knee, I believe it was, that almost cost him his life. Without any kind of exaggeration, there it was quite scary. From what I hear, he was in the hospital. He had I believe he had his ACL replaced, and then there was an infection, and it was quite serious. And I mean, I believe doctors were telling him, assuming you survive this, you will never play lacrosse again. And he kind of said, "Yeah, I don't think so." A couple years later, he's fighting for the MVP of the league. But his best year was 2007, and every time I look over these numbers from 2007, it blows me away. And it's not even numbers in terms of number of goals or number of assists. It's number of awards and championships. So I'll just go over what John Grant Jr. did in calendar year 2007. He was a member of Team Canada and won the World Indoor Lacrosse Championships in Halifax. He was the NLL Most Valuable Player. He was the NLL Champions Cup Most Valuable Player. He won the Champions Cup with the Nighthawks that year. I believe that was the year the Nighthawks finished the season 12-0 or 13-0 or something like this. He was the MLL Offensive Player of the Year and Most Valuable Player, though I don't think he won the championship with whatever team he was playing on at the time. But he did win the Mann Cup with the Peterborough Lakers and was the most valuable player of that tournament as well. So he's basically the MVP of everything that he played that year, and won 3 out of 4 championships. And I mean, he did pretty much everything you could possibly do that year. So just those kind of numbers are insane. And watching him play, there were certainly times when he was out there and just so dominant that you almost felt like he could just score at will. He could just decide, you know what, we need a goal now. I'm going to score now. And it didn't matter whether he was in close or out far, or left side or right side, or who else was on the floor. He'd just make it happen. And it did seem, I thought anyway, early in his career, if you really ticked him off early enough in the game, he would lose his dominance to some extent. I mean, he's John Grant. You can't shut him down entirely, but he wasn't quite as effective, or he'd start taking dumb penalties. That seemed to tail off in the latter few years of his career. He didn't do that quite as much. The head from Melissa here.
Yeah. I would argue that it was just as bad, if not worse.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's some of my frustrations.
Yeah, Haji kind of talked about that. He went on the Stealth Classified Friday night and gave away the secret that he would talk to him, not to like frustrate him, but to distract him. And they finally held him pointless or goalless, one of the two, in this game for the first time in like 100 games. Because Sorensen, who is a Peterborough guy, knew everything about JG and told Haji, and then they did that, but then they didn't talk about it. Like the greatest like sportsmanship I see out of that entire process is they waited until JG retired and Haji's retired, and like, I'll give away the secret to Grant. Like, I won't tell anybody while he's playing, but when he's not playing and now it's done, here's the secret to shutting down the guy.
That's classy to wait till he's retired before announcing that. That's good. Yeah. Okay, we will move on now to a few trades that went on a couple months ago. It was kind of odd. There was one. The first one was not that long after the season ended, which was Adam Jones going to the Rock. And then there were 2 on consecutive days, 2 huge ones. This was the Ryan Benesh and Aaron Bold, both getting traded, and we'll get into that in a second. And then there was another fairly small one where the Swarm traded Reed Acton to the Bandits. That one was only notable because what the Swarm got back was a 6th round draft pick next year, which is basically about the minimum you can possibly get, because there only are 6th rounds. So if you're going to trade somebody for anything and get back that, I mean, that's about as little as you can get back. And then the Bandits and the Stealth made a trade shortly before, like within an hour, I think it was, before the draft. And so we'll get into that in a second. So we'll go back to the beginning. Adam Jones goes from the Rush to the Rock. for a couple of first-round picks. And I'm excited about this because I want to see Adam Jones in a Rock uniform. I think that'll be pretty exciting. He's a very exciting, very dynamic player. He's known for being streaky. I think he's scored 6 goals in a quarter twice in the last 4 or 5 years, which not many people have done. And so when he's same sort of thing, if he gets on a roll and he's really feeling it, he can just score whenever he wants. He's a little more streaky in that if he's not feeling it, he's not likely to have sort of a 3 goals and 4 assists. He's going to be either 6 goals and 3 assists or 1 and 2. So it seems that either he's really on or he's not really there. There was a couple of games where he just didn't seem to be there at all. But speaking of not being there, hopefully the fact that he's playing for the Rock will help, because he's a teacher in Owen Sound, which is a 3-4 hour drive from Toronto. In fact, I was there a couple of weeks ago. But trying to get from Owen Sound to Toronto to wherever the Rush happened to be playing was a big pain in the butt, especially on Friday night. So he missed a few Friday night games last year, as well as a few Friday night games when he was with the Mammoth the previous couple of years. So hopefully this will allow him to make more games. 2 first-round draft picks seems a little high, depending on which Adam Jones we get. If it's the one that played for the Rush last year, he had a pretty good season, but he didn't have quite the numbers, I don't think, that he had with the Mammoth. Now that may be just because he wasn't expected to be the guy, whereas when he was with Colorado, it was either him or Grant, and with Grant being injured, Jones was the guy. When he was with the Rush, it was more, this is Matthews' team, and you're one of the other guys, and there's plenty of other guys to choose from, so maybe that's why his numbers dropped. So we'll see how that goes with Jones on the Rock. The bigger trade, and I'm trying to decide which one of these 2 trades is the bigger one, but we'll go with the Benesh one first. This is Ryan Benesh and a draft pick going from the Bandits to the Mammoth for Callum Crawford and Alex Bouquet. So the Bandits needed a righty and picked up Callum Crawford, one of the best in the game. They needed a goalie if Cosmo retires, and he still hasn't announced whether he's retiring or not, but I guess the Bandits are hedging their bets and picked up Bouquet for that. And to get that kind of stuff, you got to give up somebody good like Ryan Benesh. So, yeah, Melissa, what do you think of that one?
Can we just talk about the Adam Jones trade? Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this, because I do like Ryan Benesh. He is a really good player. He's a good leader, so I see that he has a lot of potential. I liked when he was playing with us. But I really like Callum Crawford. And I was really excited when we got him. And so now we have lost another of my favorite players. Adam Jones, at least I can cheer on in a Rock uniform. I don't know if I want to cheer Callum in Bandits. And as for Alex Bouquet, I'm curious, because the goalie situation in Denver has been a little high turnover, I guess you could say. We get a really good goalie, we only have him for a short time, and then, oh, we got the next best goalie, like, not that they're second in comparison, but, oh, no, this goalie, they're the best. And so, okay, who is going to be our backup for the Mammoth now? I actually probably have to go look. So Bouquet definitely had some learning still to do, but I would say he was a strong backup. I don't know that I see him being ready to be a starter. And so, like you said, maybe if Cosmo is going to play another year or two, being behind Cosmo could be a really, really good learning experience for Bouquet, and it may take him a huge leap and bound over where he is now. So yeah, I don't know that I like that trade or not. I think we're gonna have to wait and see how the season plays out, because Callum Crawford was instrumental in so many plays last season. But it's like Adam Jones before. He was so instrumental, and yet we lost him. Totally legitimate reasons, with the teaching and stuff. if he can't play because it's either teaching or choosing for playing, of course, he's going to choose his teaching job as he should. But this one, yeah, I think we're going to have to wait and see. I'm not entirely happy with this one. Like I said, I do like having Banesh back, but I don't know that I like losing Callum. So what about you, Tyler? Do you have any thoughts on that one or the Adam Jones trade?
Yeah, looking at the trades for the summer, for me, I'd say the biggest one was Aaron Bold leaving the Rush. He's been a consistent part of their championship runs, and he just fell off, I feel like, a little bit last season. And it's interesting to have, I don't know if the Rush gave up on him, but the fact that the Rush were willing to trade him was really, really surprising. They picked up a great goalie in Evan Kirk. And, he just won a Man Cup with Peterborough, and he's had some good success in the NLL as well, making playoffs. So he's got some experience in getting through the season. But that was definitely, I think, the biggest trade. Overall, I think whenever the goalies are trading right now, it's some aspect of it must be looking towards the future of expansion. It was one of the reasons the Stealth won their title in 2010 was in the expansion 5 years leading up. They kept having great goalies locked up to trade for good picks or to trade for high draft picks or trade for a couple players. Mostly they locked up a bunch of good goalies. Expansion teams wanted them enough to pay big bucks or big trade value back. So we know expansion is coming next year. I think that's what some of these things are doing. And Bouquet plays for New West in the summer, so he's kind of been a BC kid, and all of a sudden he's playing for Buffalo now. San Diego might want him, and at what price will they be willing to pay? So Bandits willing to give up Banesh. They also then got Durston. I feel that they kind of knew they were going to get Durston, even though the trade came like a month later. I don't think they had any doubt because Durston wasn't signing with the Stealth. He wasn't signing his contract offer or extension. So I think that they knew that they were going to get him, and they got him for a pretty good, fair price. And so they were going to backfill. Plus, they had Josh Byrne coming in with the #1 overall pick. So they had lefties coming in. They're willing to give up Banesh to get Bouquet. What are they going to get from San Diego or Philly for Bouquet in the future is something to consider. But that said, DeRuccio, their other goalie behind Cosmo, I haven't really seen him as a #1. So maybe they're bringing in Bouquet to keep him and play him. Could be. Yeah, Adam Jones, he'll get to play more. And sucks that he lives so far out of town, but it gets it's work. And it pays the bills. Lacrosse doesn't pay the bills, so he doesn't get to choose that kind of thing. And eventually he'll get settled in, as most players do, to they grow older. They move to BC or Toronto, and it's just another example of that playing out. Any other thoughts on trades at Graham?
Yeah, I guess the other one I didn't actually fully announce was I just mentioned the Bold trade, as Tyler did as well. So that was Aaron Bold and defender John LaFontaine, as well as a couple of draft picks, including a first rounder this year. First rounder this year, yes. Going from the Rush to the Black Wolves for Evan Kirk and nothing else. That surprised me. If I were to guess, it was a excuse me. If I was to guess at a Bold for Kirk deal, I would have guessed Bold for Kirk and some stuff, as opposed to Bold and some stuff for Kirk. I would have ranked Bold higher in my goalie rankings than Evan Kirk personally. Not that Kirk's going to be way the heck down there. He is a former goaltender of the year. I don't think he had a great year last year, but I don't think Bold had a great year last year either, but he did get to the finals. Yeah, so that was a little surprising to me. But if you compare my lacrosse knowledge with that of Derek Keenan, it could be argued that he knows more than me. So we'll go with Derek on that one. And
I'll take that bet.
Yeah. So yeah, well, that surprised me. But we'll see how Bold does in New England. And I did see some tweets from people saying that Bold's a good goalie, but he had an awesome defense in front of him. Excuse me. And that was the main reason for their success, was obviously an outstanding defense and a good enough goalie. I seem to remember watching Rush games over the last couple of years, and there were enough, oh my God, how did he stop that kind of saves from Bold, that I wouldn't have just said he was a good enough goalie with a great defense in front of him. He's a very good goalie. So we'll see how it goes with Evan Kirk with a better defense and Aaron Bold with not quite as good, though the Black Wolves defense was pretty darn strong last year as well. So anyway, I guess we'll see how that goes. And the other trade was the Bandits trading who we used to call Anthony Malcolm, who it was recently uncovered he prefers Tony, so it's now Tony Malcolm playing for the Vancouver Stealth, and Jordan Durston going east to the Bandits. And Malcolm is a BC kid and Durston is an Ontario kid, so that works out pretty well for both of those guys. And if the Bandits were worried about giving up a lefty like Ryan Benesh, they now have Jordan Durston, who isn't going to fill exactly the same role, but does strengthen up the left side with Callum Crawford on the right. And I think you mentioned earlier, Tyler, that Crawford is older than Benesh, or I think you said like 10 years older, but I'm pretty sure
I feel like possibly, maybe only 5 or 6.
It's actually 3 months.
Get out.
Callum Crawford is 3 months older than Ryan Benesh, which was a bit surprising to me as well.
Benesh is old.
They are both 32.
And I didn't think that sounded right when Tyler was giving me a hard time about that, but I don't have the info in front of me. I'll go with it.
Yeah. Crawford was born early November 84 and Benesh late January 85.
When did
the big difference there.
Benesh was the number one pick in 2000. I'm thinking Benesh was the number one pick in 2007. No, 2006. And following year, Callum was playing with the Stealth, but he wasn't like a rookie. He's already got a couple years in. Anyways, it's crazy. I am an
Crawford's
idiot.
first year was in 2006 with the Roughnecks. He only played 5 games, and then he was with the Stealth the next year.
Yeah. Well, Benesh feels like a kid compared to Crawford.
Benesh's first season was 2007, so yeah.
Good gracious.
Now, Benesh is only 5'9", and Crawford is 6'3", so there's a big difference right there.
Yeah.
And
wow. I would never have guessed that. I knew that they came in the league kind of the same time, but I thought Callum bounced around for a while. It was only 1 year before I saw him. Huh.
All right,
Wild.
A couple of free agent signings, and let's see what we have. Jeff Shatler, that was a surprising one for me anyway, going from the Roughnecks to the Rush. We have Tyler Richards going from the Stealth to the Roughnecks to fight for a goalie spot there against a bunch of other people. David Brock going from the Bandits to New England, and Billy D. Smith, this is a neat one, going from the Bandits to the Nighthawks. And it was actually amusing because when Callum Crawford was traded to the Bandits, one of the things he tweeted at the time was, well, now I don't have Billy D. Smith trying to kill me. And Billy D. Smith is now a Nighthawk, so you will have Billy D. Smith trying to kill you. So sorry about that.
4 times.
Yes. So that is something to look forward to, is Billy D. Smith in a Nighthawks jersey facing against the Bandits. So that'll be fun. Jeff Shatler goes to the Rush, so that was surprising for me.
Was that before or after the Jones trade? I can't remember the timeline for that one. I think it was after.
Don't remember.
I think it was after because it was the first day of free agency signing, so like early August. But the Jones trade was early in the summer. Yeah,
that sounds right. So yeah, I guess they were replacing Jones with Shatler. That's not a bad replacement.
I wonder. I always go for the theory, like, did they know they were going to get Shatler, and then that Jones was expendable, or they just saw a chance to get maximum value for Jones and they took it, and then they're like, all right, we got to get Shatler now.
Yeah, I mean, they have deadlines as to when they can start talking to players, but I'm sure a lot of those deadlines are you can't start talking to them officially. But if you happen to see them on the golf course, or you happen to
Or some
know a
Rush
friend of
player sharing a locker room with him in the summer, and it's like, hey, dude, we have an opening. Why don't you come play for us? Like, what are you gonna do?
yeah, you can't police it too much because it's just not possible. So it could have been one of those. We'll shake hands on it later, but for now we'll say that that's happening, and then that gives the general managers some advance notice and figure out what they're going to do. No comments on Tyler Richards. Tyler?
No, he's dead to me. Just kidding. Actually, I see this getting back into that goalie theory with expansion coming. They've got two young goalies with Chiliano and what's the
Del Bianco.
Del Bianco. Two very young goalies, but they have a lot of promise and a lot of. And Chiliano's already getting a lot of minutes in the NLL. T-Rich, he's proven he can play. He's won a title in the league, and if he's really back, San Diego might say, "Hey, like we'll give you something for him," or more likely, San Diego will say, "Hey, give us what do you want for either Chiliano or Del Bianco?" Because they're younger, and then the Roughnecks still have a very serviceable backup in T-Rich. So I think that'll probably play out there as well. I was talking about BK to San Diego, but I think having the two good young goalies, San Diego probably takes a run at one of those or Bouquet at some point. So yeah, having Calgary lock up as many goalies as they can is the smart play with an eye towards the future.
Yeah, as much as I'm looking forward to the NLL season starting, obviously, I am actually looking forward to the next off season as well, because there's going to be some interesting trades. There's going to be presumably an expansion draft. So seeing who the teams are going to hold back and who they're going to release and who they're going to what trades might happen before or after the draft. That's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to that. And some stuff for Melissa, some Mammoth goalie signings. Says looks like you were just adding this. So they've signed a bunch of young goalies to agreements.
So yeah, since we were just talking about Bouquet and the fact that it's like, okay, well, what does the goalie situation look like? I figured, hey, maybe I should actually get the information up. So it looks like they're looking pretty deep. I'm assuming we still have Ward because he would have been signed to a longer contract already, and so he wouldn't have shown up on the transactions page for the Mammoth. But
yeah, he's not likely not going anywhere.
Yeah, let's hope not. Remember, we did lose a goalie in the first 30 seconds of the home opener of the season, so I don't count my chickens before the hatch there. So they signed goalie Brandon Humphrey to a 2-year agreement, goalie Steve Fryer to a 1-year agreement, and he apparently was with the Toronto Rock last season, and then they signed goalie Nolan Clayton to a 2-year agreement. So I found that very interesting. Of the 3 goalies, 2 of them were signed to 2-year agreements, but I'm not familiar with any of these 3 names. Are either of you two?
I know Steve Fryer because he was I don't know him, but he was the third goaltender for the Rock last year. And I don't even remember if he had got any playing time, but he was the backup for Nick Rose while Brandon Miller was out. But once Miller came back, then I think Fryer was dropped to the practice roster. So I don't know he's got an awful lot of minutes. I can look that up while Tyler says what he thinks.
Yeah, Fryer's the only name I recognize out of the trio there. So nobody's going to carry 4 goalies. I imagine, based on experience, Fryer would be your number 2 and carry one more of the guys if they're promising. And again, lock them up as expansion's looming. If you can control 3 goalies, it reduces the pool for other people and they come shopping.
So Fryer was in 7 games last year, but recorded 0 minutes. So he was there, he was on the bench, he was probably working the door, but he never saw any floor time.
So yeah, it's going to be interesting, especially as, like both of you talked about, it looks like some of the teams are already prepping for that expansion draft and trying to get some changes made. I agree, it's going to be very exciting. But I hate expansion drafts too because you lose so many of your players. So it definitely changes up what the league looks like, which is both good and bad. But yeah, I don't want to say goodbye to some of my players. What can I say? I don't like seeing them in different jerseys, even though that's become pretty much commonplace.
All right. Some other news to get to. And okay, we'll start with Steve Govett, who announced at the end of June that he was leaving the Mammoth organization. He did say that he was going to be staying within the lacrosse community sort of thing, but he wouldn't go into any more details than that. And it was suggested at the time that he was going to be joining an expansion franchise. And that turned out to be the worst kept secret because a few months later, a guy named Joe Tsai was announced as the new owner of a team in San Diego, which will start playing next season, the 2019-2020 season, I guess, or 2018-2019. I think they're calling it the 2019 season, but it's getting confusing now because they actually started the previous year. So yeah, and then Steve Govett was announced as, I believe, president of that team, but he will not be the GM. He did announce that as well. But he was the guy that basically built the Mammoth franchise and did a great job of that. He was there for 13 years or however long they've been in Denver,
14
and 14 years. And yeah, so he was the GM for most of that time. I think he was even the coach for a short time, and the president, and one of the governors, and just the guy in Colorado. So now he's going to be the guy in San Diego, other than the GM.
My
so
hope,
if you,
my hope was that the league was going to make him have like an advisory role on all expansion teams, and so he could take his success and his experience in Colorado, and any team that comes in the league could ping him and say, "Should we do this? How would I do that?" And he would help them all be better. But I'd say I'm equally pleased that we have a single team getting his experience as well. But I kind of wish it had been all teams could be able to pick his brain, and he'd be forced to make them all better because he's done it and he did it and it worked really well. And we want to leverage that experience.
Yep. So shortly after he left the Mammoth, Dan Carey, who was the assistant general manager of the Mammoth last year and obviously a former player, is the new GM of the Colorado Mammoth. So Melissa, what do you think of those moves?
I'm not wholly surprised by the Govett move, although we had talked about it a little bit last season, because for as much as he's done for the Mammoth, and I will never undersell that he has done a huge amount for the Mammoth. The Mammoth are what they are, good, because of him. He has done so much for the team, and he was very smart and strategic. But they've also hit that point where they need new leadership. It's like when you have a startup that is doing really well, but you need that next person that can help it grow. And I think he is that great establisher, that great founder, that great startup guy, but he's not necessarily maybe that longevity guy. And so the past, I want to say 4 or 5 years, the Mammoth have really been floundering. Part of that is their on-field product, but a lot of it is other issues too. And so I think having that new leader is definitely going to be good. I don't know about Dan Carey being that leader. I really only know him as the player. And so unfortunately, he really did only play a short amount of time. But it sounds like he has been behind the scenes since. And so having that just fresh set of eyes, I think, is going to be good. And having another player perspective is going to be good. So we'll see how that goes. I'm definitely hopeful, warily hopeful. But I do agree that we needed new leadership. I think San Diego is enormously lucky to have Govett heading that up because, like I said, he took the Mammoth and brought lacrosse to Denver when most people here had no clue what the sport even was. And to turn it into one of the top teams, granted they haven't won a championship since 2006, but they are routinely in the top attendance. They have several MVPs, several player awards. I mean, there's several general manager awards, coaching awards, all those things. And so depending on what you're looking at, he's been successful. If you're only looking at how many cups he has, okay, so he's not as successful in that area, but there's a whole lot more to that. But the overall success of the team, I think he has been very, very instrumental. And I think San Diego is starting off right. And I think that's really good since we have seen some teams struggle in California. We had the San Jose Stealth, and then in the MLL there was the LA Dragons, and I think there was a team in San Francisco too.
It was the San Francisco Dragons, actually.
Okay, then which team?
LA Riptide,
Riptide, okay.
and then the Anaheim Storm in the NLL as well. So they've had 4 teams play there.
So yeah, they've definitely had some struggles, but sometimes that is not evident of future success. And the Avalanche here are a great example of that, because Colorado had a couple pro hockey teams and minor hockey league teams, and none of them seemed to stick. And then we had the Colorado Flames, which was the farm team for Calgary, and they were doing really well. And then all of a sudden we got a franchise, and holy cow, we have a successful franchise for the most part. They've had some off seasons and attendance has been down, but for the most part, we've had a successful franchise, and that was something they couldn't get going before. So I think that just shows sometimes the environment has to be right, and you have to have the right leadership team. And without both those things, it just falls apart. And I think hopefully they're approaching this a lot more strategically than Jennings did in the past, because it seemed like he was a little eager and sometimes accepted some owners that really should not have had teams. So I'm excited. I think he's going to do well.
So I guess we'll continue with that. Continue with San Diego. So the owner is a guy named Joe Tsai, who is, I believe he's Chinese American with Canadian citizenship. He played lacrosse at, I believe it was Princeton?
Yale.
Or was it Yale? Was it Yale? Okay. So he played lacrosse at Yale and got into it and loved the sport, and then became, I believe, a gazillionaire is the correct term. And I don't know if he approached the NLL and said, hey, look, I want to buy a team, or if they approached him and said, hey, you're a lacrosse guy with some money. What do you think? But in any case, it worked out, and he sounds pretty excited, and the league is pretty excited. And this is the kind of thing that we've been talking about for years, that it'd be great if the NLL was to get a Paul Allen or a Mark Cuban or one of these sort of high-profile billionaires to invest in the league. And just the fact that they did that would give the league a little more legitimacy. And I don't know if Joe Tsai was among them in terms of being well known. I had never heard of him, but he does run one of the biggest internet companies in the world, and the numbers of this company called Alibaba are just astounding. It's not as big in North America, I don't think, but in China it's just massive.
They are the Amazon of the rest of the world compared to Amazon in handling North America. It's a big market in the rest of the world.
And when you take the numbers, his company is bigger than Amazon and Walmart and eBay and a few other things all combined. So he's got the bucks. And the fact that he's a lacrosse guy is excellent. It's not just he's some businessman trying to capitalize on it. He's actually got some passion for the sport, which can only help. So San Diego looks like it's going to go pretty well. Again, they're starting a year from now, so they've got all kinds of time to sell tickets and to build up a fan base and to get their name out there and to get their brand known and that sort of thing. And they've started off doing a good job of that.
I share the exact same question as you. Did the league have to sell him, or did he want to buy in himself? I really wonder about that. Either way, I'm really happy we have him, but I kind of wonder what the first thought was, or the first reach out. Who came to who?
And on the other side of the country, we have Philadelphia getting an expansion team for next season as well. They will be owned by Comcast, who is the same company that owns the Philadelphia Flyers, and they will be playing out of the Wells Fargo Arena, which is where the Wings used to play, where the Flyers play, and I believe that's owned by Comcast as well. So that certainly is going to help things with. And I mean, pretty much any team in the NLL that also shares NHL ownership has done well. So this is a good idea for Philadelphia. They've got a name the team contest, which we pretty much all know is going to end up being the Wings. And if it's not, we will all fall over in shock because it's just not the right decision, honestly. But as somebody said on Twitter, it's kind of a good idea in that it'll get the fans involved. It'll get them passionate about it, probably because 90% of them will be on there voting every day saying, it better be the Wings, it better be the Wings. And it makes the fans feel like they had some say in the matter when they come out and say, because of overwhelming support, we're going to call the team the Philadelphia Wings. And so all the fans will be there. I helped do that when it was more than likely a foregone conclusion to begin with. But in any case, so the NLL is back in Philadelphia, which is going to be great for the league. It was one of the places that I think a lot of people thought we probably never should have left, but depending on the ownership, depending on the arena deal they had, it just wasn't working. So new ownership, new arena deal. We'll see how that goes. And there's also the possibility of a third new team coming next year, and rumors say that it's either Halifax or Miami. And I wrote on my blog a couple of months ago that I'm not super thrilled with either one of those, honestly. I mean, if they can get the right ownership, they can make it work anywhere, but some places may require a lot more work than others. And Miami is not known to be a great sports town. I believe the Dolphins get a lot of support, but the Marlins haven't really, even in seasons when they did win the World Series, they weren't getting super huge crowds. I don't remember the numbers for the Orlando Titans, but I don't think they were super. They only lasted one season there.
They were bad. I went to one game there. It was a small crowd.
Yeah. So hopefully they can use the next year if they get their stuff together, then they'll be announced for next season as well. So they'll have just like San Diego and Philly, they'll have a full year plus to get ready. So we'll see how that works. Halifax is a little different in that they don't have any pro sports teams other than possibly like minor league hockey. But the CFL has never gone out there. The NHL has never gone out there. So this will be kind of a first.
But they should be in the mold of Saskatchewan in that style. And in that sense, except for they do have CFL in Saskatchewan, but like there's not a lot of competition for the entertainment dollar. So that is more promising to me than Miami, where there is tons of competition for your entertainment dollar.
Yeah, the thing that concerns me about Halifax is that pretty much nobody who plays in the NLL lives within a 2-hour flight of Halifax. There may be a couple that live in Quebec or the eastern part of the U.S. in the New England area that might be an hour and a half flight to Halifax. But pretty much everybody is going to be flying into Halifax for every game, unless they can convince a few to move there. And I guess the Georgia Swarm have convinced a couple people to move down there. Not as many as they had in Minnesota. But yeah, maybe they may have some luck doing that with Halifax. I actually have a nephew who lives in Halifax, so maybe I'll talk to him and see what he thinks. He's a hockey guy, but I don't know if he has any interest at all in lacrosse. But we'll see if he hears anything in the local paper and stuff. So,
well, I'd say Denver, when we got the team, we didn't really have anybody even remotely close to living here, except for Brian Langtree, who tried out for the team once it was established. So I wouldn't say that's a complete deal breaker. I mean, at one point, I would say a third of the Mammoth team actually was living here, and I would say that would probably be the 2006 team. But for most of the Mammoth franchise history, I would say most of the team has had to fly in to play. So I wouldn't say that's a complete deal breaker.
Yeah, that's true enough. And the fact that Halifax is out on the East Coast probably doesn't matter that much if it's a 2-hour flight from anywhere. Denver is probably a 2-hour flight from a lot of places as well. So, yeah, maybe that part won't matter much. So, but it does sound like Sakevich and his team are doing a lot more due diligence on their potential owners and potential cities than previous commissioners did, where it seemed like if you've got the money, then you're in. Whereas now is if you've got the money, then we'll talk to you. And then we'll start looking at what your plan is, what your interests are, where the money's coming from, what do you think is going to happen with this team, how are you planning to build it, and so on and so on. They seem to be doing a lot more work to make sure that they don't have a team that shows up and just vanishes 2 years later because they lost interest. So if they do announce Halifax, then maybe we should be optimistic that they've already done the work and whatever concerns we have already been addressed to the satisfaction of the league. So maybe we'll. So I guess that's it for expansion. The other interesting thing that they've done, and we talked about this last year, and they kind of did what we suggested that they do, except they did it wrong. We suggested that they move this beginning of the season earlier and the end of the season earlier, basically shift the whole thing so that they're not having playoff games into June, which just seemed very late. I mean, it's not like the NLL needs to change to make the MLL happy. But if you've got a whole whack of players in the NLL who also want to play in the MLL, and you do a little bit to make that easier for them and hope that the MLL does a little bit to make it easier for them, then everybody's happy. Plus, people were missing the summer leagues, whether it's the WLA or the MSL, because their teams were going deep into the NLL playoffs, and so they missed half that season as well. So what the league did was move everything up, and the season begins on December 8th instead of the first day of January or very late December, as it has in the previous few years. But they didn't move the end. So they didn't shift everything, they just made it longer. And what they've done is mostly eliminate the back-to-back weekends. So we don't have teams playing 2 games on a weekend. It still happens, there's a couple of them, but not as many. And I think that was their goal. That was what they were trying to reduce, was the travel between games in one day. So they didn't do what we asked them to do, but I guess the players will be happier in that they don't have these terrible travel weekends.
I feel like there's been some mention that they're kind of planting the seed that, hey, we're going to have more teams. We want to have more games. So we're already getting people used to starting in mid-December, early December. And as we add more games to the schedule, some of those bye weeks, some teams will get 2 now where they only ever had 1 before. You'll lose one of those bye weeks, but it'll be at the same, we're just setting the calendar now. Get used to the new calendar. The games are coming in the future.
Yeah, they did suggest that in the next few years, they may be going from an 18-game season to 20 to 22. They've also talked about the possibility of up to 30 teams over the next 10 years. So, yeah, that seems like really optimistic expansion. But Sakevich has also talked about the fact that he was talking to 30 different cities who were interested in an expansion NLL franchise. So if he can get half of those to buy in, then that's major expansion in the league. And as long as he does it right and he, doesn't add 6 teams in a single year, and continues his due diligence, I guess that expansion for the league. And then the question is, where are all the players going to come from?
Where are all the goals going to come from?
And the coaches.
You can find runners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're basically going to have to look through every player who's ever played in the NLL and retired and has any interest in coaching and say, you want to come back? Because we need coaches. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of openings there if that's the case. And what else was there? So they've moved the season back, and one change to the playoffs, and that is that the second round, which used to be a best of two with a possible mini game, will now be back to single game elimination. So we'll have one game in the first round, one game in the second round, and a best of three in the finals. And so the mini game is no more, and yeah, that's too bad, kind of, but not really.
I'd say we utilized it so little, and it seems like the team who won the first game ended up winning. So yeah, I kind of like going back to the one and done. Either bring it or go home.
Do we also have 4 teams making the playoffs now on both sides, and not just second and third?
I don't think they changed the number of teams that make the playoffs. They may have to do that next year once there's 2 extra teams or possibly 3 extra teams.
Yeah, we don't have extra teams yet. That's right. We keep talking about them, but they don't actually exist.
Yeah. So I guess another issue with adding the third team, if it's Miami or Halifax, is that then we're going to have 6 teams in the East and 7 teams in the East and 5 in the West. 4 or 5. I'm getting lost. So instead of we had 1 extra team in the East over the West, and then we had San Diego to even things up, and then we added Philly in the East bigger. And now if we add 1 more team, the East is going to be 2 teams bigger. So I don't know if they'll go back to the crossover thing they had before, where the third place Eastern team actually gets into the playoffs in the West or some weird thing like that. So yeah, I don't know if they've discussed that.
Can't really send Minnesota back to the West. Not an option anymore.
Not so much anymore.
Jinx.
So that's about it for the league. I haven't heard of any rule changes in terms of the actual gameplay. I don't know if they're working on those or they just haven't announced any this year. But they had a couple of announcements in previous years. This year there haven't been any. So for now, at least, there are no changes to the game itself. Yeah, I guess that's about everything for the NLL. There's a couple of non-NLL topics that maybe we can touch on briefly, because I think we're close to an hour now.
Well, one quick thing. I mean, we talked about the fact of the season expanding and why, but how do you even feel about it? I mean, we kind of complained last season that the season was starting to feel too long, and now we're going from starting it maybe the last week of December, first couple weeks of January, to the first week of December. That's heading right into prime holidays when people are a lot more distracted and just not going to be into it necessarily. What do you guys think?
Well, the first thing I thought is at least the players that don't make the team won't get cut the day before Christmas anymore. But I think the overarching reason for this is they know they're going to have more teams. They want to have a longer schedule. I feel like 18 games. They kept saying Jake Elliott, Brad Challoner, South Classified, frequently said this summer that it's going to be a 20-game season, and they pulled back from it right at the last moment. So they had all that time booked out to add extra games this year, even before the new teams come in. I'm very interested to see how long they can stretch out the regular season to be. That matters. I feel like 16 was actually pretty good. With the number of teams we had, 16, the games mattered. You did kind of have to play the other teams a lot. But just adding in 1 more team each side, I can still see Rochester and Buffalo playing each other. You added 1 more team, play each other 3 times. You added 1 more team and more games, and they're still going to play each other 4 times just because it's convenient and it costs less, and it's not really solving any problems as far as alleviating or adding variety to what's happening during the regular season. But I don't know. That previously we had 14 teams in a 16-game schedule, 15 teams, 16-game schedule. So there's a lot of variety. But growing the regular season now and not starting in a month earlier and still ending at roughly the same time it was odd. I do like the earlier start time. I think starting the season right when people had to pay attention to who's the roster cuts. No, I'm actually paying attention to what I'm getting my kids for Christmas right now. I don't even care. Now that'll happen a lot sooner kind of will be competing with Thanksgiving in America, but they I think they'll get a little better news cycle. They'll go through the holidays, and when they have their season kickoff, it won't be competing with the College Football National Championship. It won't be competing with the NFL playoffs starting. So that, in that sense, they can probably get a little better press in the markets that they're going with. And so there's some good reasons there, but having the season still run into June, it's right at the max. I'd rather it was still ending in mid-May like it used to.
Now they did, with the single game elimination in the second round, they did cut that down by a week. So the playoffs will be a week shorter. I don't know if they'll go with they'll have a gap week in there. Like they did last year. They had the first round, the second round, and then everybody had a week off, and then the finals started. So, and part of that was, I think, NCAA championship weekend fell on that middle week. So not only are they not trying to compete with the NCAA, but they can use that big weekend to pump the NLL, saying, "Hey, championship is next weekend. So once you're done with these guys, let's go over to the indoor game." And I guess
really hoping that Philly gets into the NLL playoffs so that people, when Philly has a team and the college playoffs are across the street in Philadelphia, then they'll be like, "Hey, those games are over. Come inside for more lacrosse, you lacrosse nuts." That would be best case scenario for the league.
That always seemed to be what should have been obvious for cities that had teams in both the NLL and the MLL. And I think they did that in the first year that the Toronto Nationals existed, and then never again. At NLL games, it was basically, "Hey, you want to see these guys over the summer? It's still NLL players, and they're playing down the street at the exhibition. So come on out and see those guys." And then they never did again. But if you've got an arena with 15,000 lacrosse fans in it, and you've got another lacrosse team, it just makes so much sense to advertise the heck out of it. But neither league wanted to do that. And I'm hoping with the changing of the commissioner that Sikevich is not coming in with that past. Daniel came in, and he had been the second in command to Jim Jennings, I believe, for however long he was there. So when he became commissioner, it was the same thing. Sikevich is going to come in, or has come in, and hopefully he's like, "Why don't we talk to this other league? That's stupid. Let's just throw all that ancient crap away and move on." And hopefully he's doing that. We haven't seen any of that happen yet, but we can hope that that's part of what he's doing.
He does seem a lot more, I mean, I want to say business-minded, but that almost downplays it. I don't think he's going to let trivial things like that get in the way, but at the same time, they are a competition. So you understand why they don't want to work together, but at the same time, so many people I know had season tickets to both leagues. And it wasn't until they started doing this kind of infighting where you had to choose one league or the other, or you were missing, 5 games, that a lot of people I knew gave up their tickets. So it would be nice to see them be cooperative, because I think it grows both leagues. It's not one of those share of wallet things where it's this or that. There's a lot of people that can do both. The tickets aren't super expensive. It's not like you're shelling out, $15,000 or something for season tickets. They're reasonable. So you can afford to do both leagues. And so a lot of people were doing that until, like I said, they made you have to decide, because especially for me, being a Denver fan, the Outlaws, because they play at Invesco, which is home of the Broncos, their season is very home heavy to begin with and very away heavy on the end. And so that meant, okay, I just missed the first 4 home games. Oh, wait, I basically missed the whole season, So why have season tickets? So it would be nice to see, like you said, that he looks past that and looks more at the business aspects. So it'll be interesting.
Now, having said that, Toronto Rock forward Tom Schreiber was named the MLL MVP again this year for the second straight year. And to my knowledge, neither The Rock nor the NLL said a thing about it. There is nothing on the Rock site saying, hey, Rock Ford is also a field player and he's the MVP. There was nothing. So even when they signed him last year, they didn't say, by the way, he's the reigning MLL MVP that we just signed. They talked about he's a Princeton guy and he was a lacrosse standout at Princeton, but they never mentioned the MLL, which made no sense to me. So
considering he missed a third or half the season and still pulled that off, I think that guy can play.
Yeah, he's not bad. So there's the analysis part of this podcast. What else was there? There's a couple of things not NLL related. Man Cup, just a few weeks ago. Congratulations to the Peterborough Lakers, who came back from being down 2-0 to take out the new Westminster Salmon Bellies in 6 games. The fact that they won was not the controversy, but there was a bit of a controversy afterwards, which we'll just touch on, which was a secret video of some of the Peterborough players with the Man Cup and basically playing with it in the ocean. They went to the beach and they're in the water. They're tossing the cup back and forth. The cup itself is in the water. And this is, of course, in the beach in British Columbia, so it's salt water. So there was talk about whether this was disrespectful and whether it should have happened. There was also talk that, well, it was clearly a secret video. Somebody was taking a video from the parking lot 100 feet away. You couldn't actually tell who the players were. And it was obviously taken without the player's knowledge or consent. So should it be a what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, as Brad Challoner suggested? This is their thing. Let them have their fun and leave them alone. But as Tyler mentioned before we started recording, it was also the Peterborough Lakers some number of years ago who destroyed the Man Cup. It was like, of course, they don't have the real Man Cup. They have a replica of it, but it got dropped in a fire or something and completely destroyed. And so now they have a new replica and they take it in the ocean. They start throwing it back and forth. So that was a bit of a controversy. You guys have any thoughts on that?
Sure. So, yeah, like you said, I said, they didn't burn it. So what's the problem? Like, saltwater is not perfect. But they just won a title that some people go their whole career for, like Curtis Hodgson for the Stealth, and for New West. It was his, let's say, 3rd time going for the Man Cup, and he's never got it. And a lot of people want that trophy more than the NLL Champions Cup. And after winning it, they felt pretty good. So they went out and celebrated. I mean, they're not home. They're like, so they didn't want to just go sit in a hotel and celebrate. They went out and found a beach, take advantage of being on the West Coast, and they partied with it. And the cup got in the ocean water, and who cares? They didn't burn it. So I'm moving on from this story. What do you think, Melissa?
Considering some of the stories I've heard about the NLL Champions Cup, this sounds like a pretty tame thing. So I just am surprised it's a controversy. Yeah, I've heard of worse stories about the Champions Cup for the NLL. So maybe it is because, like you said, there's more of a prestige for it. I'm just kind of surprised. Granted, I was also surprised at some of the stories I've heard about the cup. So maybe that's just my ignorance. But I agree. It was probably in just celebration. Is it the best for the cup? Probably not. Has worse been done to the cup? Probably. So, yeah, I don't have much on that. Did you have anything else, Graham?
Yeah, if you read some of the stories that happened to the Stanley Cup over the last 100 years or so, Ottawa won the cup once back, I don't know, in the 20s or 30s or something, and the Stanley Cup got left out on the frozen Rideau Canal overnight. It was left at a bus stop because everybody thought somebody else was going to grab it. So while they were on the bus going wherever they were going, the Stanley Cup was back at the bus stop. Other stories like that have happened to the Stanley Cup and, like you said, the Champions Cup. And I'm sure other things like that have happened to the Man Cup in the past. And all things considered, this was not that big a deal. Is it disrespectful to throw the trophy back and forth? Yeah, maybe, but again, is it really the worst thing that could happen? Probably not. Bigger news and news that could be ongoing, and this is a little weird because well, I'll just get into what happened, and then we'll see what could happen in the future. The MLL sent out an email to a huge list of people. I don't know if it was just the players themselves, but I think it was other people as well, possibly journalists and such, that contained a link to a web page, which was actually an Excel document, I believe, that contained personal information on every MLL player, current and former, as well as others people in the MLL player pool, which included people who could have played in the MLL but never actually did. But that included not only their name and things like their birth date and their career off the floor, their height and their weight, and where they come from and where they went to school and all those sort of things, but included their social security number as well. So as soon as you've got somebody's name, social security number, and birth date, you've got identity theft, or you certainly could have identity theft. And I don't think they know of any actual cases of anybody losing anything because of that. And the link was removed after 3 or 4 days. I think it was up for a few days. But at the time, it seemed that all the players were just livid about this, and rightfully so. There was even talk of lawsuits, and I don't know if it was the players talking about lawsuits or people wondering if there were going to be. But it seemed like it was going to be a huge, huge story. And it sort of blew over after about a week, and you just sort of never heard about it again. And I haven't heard anything about it in weeks. Now it is the off season for the MLL. So it could be that once the season starts picking up again, then we're just going to start hearing about players who don't want to be involved in the league anymore, or players that are boycotting, or players that are saying, if you want me to come back, you better make these changes. So yeah, well, that'll be interesting. And as Tyler was mentioning, then the Equifax thing happened a little while later, and it wasn't just, well, here's information on a couple thousand lacrosse players. Here's information on 100 million people of around the world. So yeah, data breaches happen all the time, and it's getting kind of scary. But did you guys hear any more than this?
Go ahead, Melissa.
This was complete news to me. I'll admit I've had my head in the hole in the sand for a little while. I've been focusing on teaching, so I can't believe that something like this happened. But at the same time, most data breaches are because of human error, and this really is huge. I mean, ignoring the identity theft, depending on who that went out to, that could have gone out to some people who maybe there's stalker issues, there's all kinds of weird issues. I mean, yeah, it's really bad. And I'm really careful with my data, and yet I have had to lock my account down several times because of stupid data breaches and people who don't seem to know how to control the data. And for something like that to happen, I'm kind of flabbergasted. But then at the same time, you have people who write their passwords on the little sticky on their computer and wonder why their computer gets broken into, Security can only go as far as the weakest link in humans, and as humans, we are pretty stupid. So it really sucks, and I really hope that the league is doing, helping the players any way they can, because, yeah, that potential for data breach is huge. That identity theft is huge, and that could be very, 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 very long-reaching. I just can't believe something like that could have happened. So, and this was news to me tonight. I hadn't heard about it, but I also have kind of been ignoring everything that's come into my inbox. So.
Yeah, there was a whole lot of stupid happening on this one. Is it still considered a data breach if somebody posts it to download, as opposed to somebody have to break in to actually get it?
The Rocky Mountain, or not the Rocky Mountain, the Republican National Convention did that. They actually posted hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of voter registration data on a publicly accessible link.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So yeah, the players were super fire pissed about this one, and it being the off season. I mean, and it was like 2 weeks after their season started, so there's a long time of off season to wait for this. We have to wait until April or May to see if somebody's not showing up to play because they are still mad about it. I think there's definitely an opportunity for players to look at like suing the league for like breach of something or other. Luckily, I'm not a lawyer, so I can just leave it at that and say I don't know. But I would be looking at options like that. It highlights the biggest difference between the NLL and the MLL. The MLL, the players do not have a union. They don't have a lot of power in these things. They can't push back on the league like the NLL players can and have. So I would suspect before next season starts that the MLL players unionize. I haven't heard anything about that, but it's clearly in their best interest to have a lot more authority here. There's just some interesting dynamics in the MLL. Like a couple teams have their own owners, but some teams are just kind of owned by the league. So when a player doesn't have a relationship with their owner and they get traded, like the league says, "Hey, go play for this other team. Like we need you to go over there." Like, okay, I have to because I don't have a union to back me up. I don't have any authority. I don't have my own owner protecting me because you own both teams. You're just shipping me around, and you do that, and you give away all my personal data. Why am I showing up to play this year? I mean, they make some money. They make enough money that the players keep showing up, but it's definitely not enough money that if somebody focused on doing something else with their weekends for 5 months of the year, they could maybe recover those costs, go put on camps or something. There's not a ton of choices for these players, but there are ways that they could get that money back. And so come April, come May, we'll see who doesn't show up to play in the MLL based on the MLL disrespecting the players and not treating them right. But we kind of got to hurry up and wait for that. What do you think, Graham?
It'll be interesting to see if we have players from the MLL join the NLL this year that may not have in the past. In that, well, I don't want to cut into the MLL season, but if I'm less interested in playing in the MLL this year because of the reasons you just said, they might say, you know what, I'm going to join the NLL, and if my team's out of the playoffs and I can play in the MLL anyway, well, then I have a decision to make. But if I get into the playoffs and I can't play half the MLL season, maybe I'm not missing as much as I thought I was. And so we might see some more sort of migration from the MLL to the NLL this season, and in which case we may see that sooner than rather than later because of the training camp starting a month from now. And I don't know if we're going to see Paul Rabel and Kyle Sweeney and those kind of guys in the NLL this year. I don't know if it'll go that far, but there may be a handful of other players. Maybe Joe Walters is more interested in coming back to the Nighthawks than he might have been otherwise. Who knows? Yeah, so that'll be interesting to watch to see if that has long-reaching ramifications or if it'll just kind of go away. And I kind of doubt it'll just go away, but maybe, like you said, because it's happened very shortly into the off season and there's months of no news from the MLL, then we may not hear much about it until the spring. So this is probably the longest podcast we've ever done, considering there has been no games in the last 3 months, but there's been a lot of stuff to talk about. So I think we covered everything that we planned to, and probably more. So no awesome, not awesome this week, and no predictions this week. But and actually, we didn't really touch on the draft all that much. But as we said before, none of the three of us are real experts on the junior leagues or where these players are coming from or that sort of thing. So, yeah. So the season starts in a couple of months. Training camp starts in about 1 month. And actually, I think the Stealth have already announced when their camps are going to be, and there's a few exhibition games that the Rock have announced and the Stealth have announced, and I think the Rush are playing a couple. and probably the other teams as well. They may or may not have announced them, but we're getting right into the swing of things over the next month or two.
So I have one
so-
prediction. I predict
Sure,
next
go
season
ahead.
is going to be awesome.
That would be my guess as well. I'm going to go with that. Yeah, so this will be the last season with only 9 teams. We're going to have at least 11, if not 12, next season. So that should be fun. And like I said, I'm looking forward to the expansion drafts this coming summer. So, but we've got a full season in front of us before that, and we will maybe we'll try and get together for another preseason podcast, maybe like a week or two before the season starts, once training camps are in full gear and we see what's going on there. And if not, then we will see you the week after the first game, so the middle of December. I guess that will do it. So this has been another episode of Addicted to Lacrosse, Season 5, believe it or not. For Tyler and Melissa, I'm Graham. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in a month or two.